Federal emergency management should be state and locally led rather than how it has operated for decades. It has been slow to respond. At the federal level, it's even been slower to get the resources to Americans in crisis. And that is why this entire agency needs to be eliminated as it exists today and remade into a responsive agency.
Yeah, the issue is that she's right. In the wake of the devastating flooding that killed over 100 people, with many still missing, and the death toll, certainly likely to still go up, we have been slow to respond. She would just have you believe that that's a thing that's baked in there. It's always been like that. It's the classic Trump thing. Biden did it. Doesn't matter. A day after I'm president, Biden did it. A month after I'm president, Biden did it. He'll be on his last day of his presidency. He'll still be blaming Biden for the things he did. But in this case, I'm not even as mad at Trump as I am at Kristi Noem, because she apparently has been responsible for making FEMA slower to respond. Not just in the case of the flooding. This is a pervasive thing that could affect disaster response in multiple instances. But here it definitely, and we already have the evidence, did affect the speed that federal responses came. So she had recently enacted a sweeping rule aimed at cutting spending. Again, that's the only thing that matters in our government, is cutting spending. Doesn't matter if it hurts the ability of the government to help people. So she had a thing where for every contract and grant over $100,000, she would have to do her personal sign off before any funds could be released. Now for FEMA, where disaster response costs routinely soar to the billions, that limit is basically nothing. And this might remind you of what Doggy was doing, where basically every agency had to sign off on every expenditure, which sounds good if all you care about is cutting spending. But when you have to actually operate a government, it ground everything to a halt, and they had to fix it because it didn't work. Well, in this case, doesn't work either. And so a longtime FEMA official talks about the change that was made that we just referenced, saying, we were operating under a clear set of guidance. Lean forward, be prepared, anticipate what the state needs, and be ready to deliver it. That is not as clear of an intent for us at the moment. Now the intent is, don't spend any money and get ready for us to can you, because we're gonna kill FEMA entirely. That's what their priority was. And so let's talk about how these new policies and this new philosophy of FEMA interacted with the response to the flooding in Texas. As Central Texas towns were submerged in rising waters, CNN reports FEMA officials realized they couldn't pre-position urban search and rescue crews from a network of teams stationed regionally across the country. In the past, FEMA would have swiftly staged these teams, which are specifically trained for situations including catastrophic floods, closer to the disaster zone in anticipation of urgent requests. But in this case, even as Texas rescue crews raced to save lives, FEMA officials realized they needed Noem's personal approval before sending those additional assets. And unfortunately, it didn't come fast. Noem didn't authorize deployment of these urban search and rescue teams until Monday, more than 72 hours after the flooding began. I guess the requests weren't made at one of the places she was having her photo taken, so it had to go to the back of the line and she couldn't prioritize it. And so they're saying, don't worry about this. It is utterly irrelevant that it took us 3 days to do what would have happened before the flooding under a prior administration, because the states were responding. The states had people out there. Can you think about how utterly callous that is? If you're a person who has lost family members, you have people that are still missing, you want every resource possible out there trying to save the lives of your friends and family. And they're like, get off our back. Travis County had some boats out there. Who the hell needs FEMA? Who the hell needs the federal government? I just ask any MAGA person out there, did you vote for Donald Trump so that he could give you a government that just ignores you? And you're just left to, well, I hope you have a good state government, because we're just gonna be taking photos. We're not actually gonna be on the ground to help people out. But that is unfortunately their philosophy. And they're not apologizing for this. They're not promising that they're gonna change the policy. They're gonna stick with it until in a couple of months, FEMA doesn't even exist anymore. And then it's not gonna be 72 hours before federal help comes. It's never going to come, and you're gonna be on your own. And I hope Texas is responsible when it comes to flooding and winter storms and fires and earthquakes and floods. And I hope Mississippi and Alabama and Florida and South Carolina, I hope they all have their ducks in the row, because your fate is gonna be tied to that. No federal help, nothing to plug the gaps, no emergency funding that Republicans have always been quick to request when their state gets hit by a hurricane or when there's tornadoes. Why do they need that funding? for the hurricanes in Florida last year or in North Carolina? Why was it needed at all? Because apparently the states have everything they need, we're being told. But the Republicans certainly have an act like that in the past. So what's going to happen in future years, David? You know, in the next set of emergencies, when the federal government has totally wiped their hands of it?
Well, the pushback that I've heard from some of the people on the right in defense of Kristi Noem is that she was very busy. She was too busy, and as a result, she didn't really understand that she needed to go ahead and give the green light for the urban search and rescue teams. Well, how busy was she? 24 hours after the flood, she was posting on social media different pictures of her on a horse and asking her constituents in South Dakota, which portrait do you think should be my official portrait from when I was governor? And she was interacting with the responses. So she clearly had time to look at pictures of her on a horse, but she didn't have time to actually tell people, yes, send the resources immediately. That's the first thing. The other thing is Kristi Noem, over the last weekend, she gave an interview on Fox News where she blamed the Biden administration because she said, you know, the weather systems from the National Weather Service are antiquated, that they're old, and Donald Trump has decided that we're going to upgrade these systems, but the upgrades haven't been made yet. Well, some reporters actually asked, searched congressional records and federal records and found no evidence that Donald Trump has ever said that he would upgrade the National Weather Service systems. Never in any of his position papers, he's never spoken about it. And so the White House and then Homeland Security are not commenting when asked by reporters, what specific upgrades is she talking about? They don't respond. In other words, even Trump officials know that Kristi Noem is lying through her teeth. She is trying to blame the Biden administration. She is shamelessly doing it, and she's making up things out of whole cloth because she and the Trump administration and the Republican governor of Texas, they do not want to be held accountable for things that they did wrong, for mistakes that they made that could have prevented people from dying. It's that simple.
Yeah, they're covering their ass and hoping that you'll forget about it and move on, at least until the next disaster that they're not going to help out.
And I forgot one thing, John. There had been some upgrades to the National Weather Service during the Biden administration. He had actually spent money to upgrade some of the systems and some of the radars and some of the communication. So yes, there have been upgrades to the National Weather Service, but not under Donald Trump.
Exactly. The philosophy, again, is just cutting. They're not going to spend. And by the way, like some people might think, okay, well, if my house gets destroyed or whatever with Trump, I'm not going to get any help. But I don't care. All I care is about cutting the spending. But they're not cutting the overall spending. They're diverting way more money to ICE. And if Noem was busy with anything, it's with this constant 24/7 obsession with deporting anyone darker than them. That's what they're spending all their time on. And look, maybe when there's no threat to you and your family, it's easy for you to just listen to whatever, Sean Hannity's barking at you and believe, yeah, Colombians are the biggest threat to my family. But I don't know, when the river is rapidly rising and kids are getting swept away, all that propaganda seems pretty goddamn ridiculous, doesn't it? When you're reminded of what actual threats to you and your family look like, and when you're reminded how important it is that we have a responsible government that is both capable and willing of helping out. But some people will forget. In a couple days, they won't be thinking about this anymore, and they'll be right back to, it's all the migrants. That's the only thing DHS should be worried about. It doesn't matter if FEMA goes away. It's pathetic.